I'm Naomi, 29 years old, and I live in Charleston, South Carolina. This city, with its charming cobblestone streets and historic homes, holds a complex beauty, a blend of old-world grace and deep-rooted traditions. I moved here 5 years ago, fresh out of college, filled with the kind of optimism only youth can provide. My dream was to make a real impact in the marketing world, to bring fresh perspectives and innovative ideas to established companies. I landed a junior position at Southern Charm Marketing, a firm known for its traditional, well-established clientele. It felt like a big step, a chance to prove myself. From day one, though, I noticed a subtle chill in the air, a quiet undercurrent I couldn't quite place. I was often the only black woman in meetings, sometimes the only black person in the entire department. It wasn't overt hostility, nothing you could point to directly. It was more like a soft erasure, a polite overlooking. My suggestions, no matter how well researched, would often be met with a nod, then swiftly forgotten, only to resurface later from a male colleague as a brilliant new idea. It was frustrating, a constant battle to be seen and heard. I'd spend hours perfecting presentations, crafting compelling campaigns, only to have them receive lukewarm reception, while less developed ideas from others were praised. It felt like I was speaking a different language, or perhaps that my voice simply wasn't registering in the room. My colleagues, mostly white and from similar backgrounds, were always pleasant enough. They'd smile, make small talk about the weather or weekend plans, but there was always a distance. It was a professional courtesy that never quite blossomed into genuine camaraderie. I tried to bridge the gap, to find common ground. I'd join in on casual office banter, offer to help with extra tasks, even bring in homemade cookies, a southern gesture of goodwill. But the invisible wall persisted, a silent barrier that kept me perpetually on the outside. There were times I'd walk into the break room and conversations would subtly shift, or a comfortable silence would descend. It wasn't a dramatic halt, just a gentle pause, a brief moment where I felt like an intruder, an outsider looking in on a private club. I started to question myself, my abilities, my very presence. Was I not articulate enough? Was my work truly subpar? The self-doubt gnawed at me, despite my strong academic record and genuine passion for marketing. It was a lonely feeling, battling these internal demons. My family, back in a smaller town in Georgia, always encouraged me, reminding me of my strength and resilience. But they weren't here, in the polished, indifferent halls of Southern Charm Marketing, experiencing the daily grind of subtle dismissal. I'd call my mother, trying to explain the intangible nature of it all. It's not like they say anything mean, Mama. It's just, I'm not really there to them. She'd listen patiently, her wisdom a comforting balm over the phone lines. The company culture was steeped in tradition, in the way things have always been done. Innovation was spoken of, but rarely truly embraced, especially if it came from an unexpected source. I often felt my ideas were too out there for their comfort zone. I started to notice how certain colleagues, those who fit the mold, received more opportunities, more mentorship, more visible projects. It wasn't about merit alone. It was about fitting in, about being part of the established network. This constant feeling of being overlooked, of having my contributions minimized, began to wear on me. It wasn't just about professional growth anymore. It was about my sense of self-worth, about maintaining my identity in a space that seemed determined to erase it. I knew I needed a change, a different approach. I couldn't keep banging my head against the same invisible wall. Something had to give, and I realized it had to come from within me. The weekly team meetings were a prime example of the dynamic at Southern Charm Marketing. I'd meticulously prepare, armed with data, market insights, and creative concepts for our clients. I believed in the power of well-thought-out strategy. I would wait for my turn, patiently, sometimes nervously, to present my ideas. When I finally spoke, my voice, though clear, often felt like it was swallowed by the large conference room, echoing without truly landing. My colleagues, particularly the senior ones, would listen with polite, unreadable expressions. There were nods, sometimes a brief, interesting, but rarely the engaged discussion or genuine curiosity I saw directed at others. It was a performance, not a collaboration. Then, a few minutes later, a male colleague, often Mark, with his booming voice and confident demeanor, would rephrase one of my points, sometimes almost verbatim. Suddenly, it was a groundbreaking insight, met with enthusiastic agreement and praise. "That's a brilliant take, Mark!" Or, "Exactly what we need, a fresh perspective," the director would exclaim, completely oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant, of where the idea had truly originated. I'd sit there, a silent witness to my own intellectual theft. It was a slow, insidious process, chipping away at my confidence. Each time it happened, a small part of me would retract, making it harder to speak up the next time, to believe my voice mattered in that echo chamber. I tried to address it once, subtly after a meeting. I approached Mark, mentioning how glad I was that he liked my idea, since he presented it so well. He just chuckled. "Great minds think alike, Naomi. You must have been on the same wavelength." His dismissal was so casual, so effortless, it left me speechless. It wasn't malicious, not overtly, but it was deeply dismissive. It confirmed that my contributions were not just overlooked, but actively appropriated without a second thought. The social dynamics outside of meetings were equally telling. Lunch invitations were extended to everyone but me, or if I was included, I'd find myself trailing behind, conversations already in full swing, leaving no room for me to join in. I'd often eat alone at my desk, pretending to be engrossed in work, while the sounds of laughter and chatter drifted in from the break room. It was a constant reminder of my perceived isolation, a quiet hum of exclusion. Even casual conversations about weekend plans or personal lives felt guarded around me. Colleagues would share intimate details with each other, but with me, it was always surface level, about work, or the weather, or general pleasantries. I found myself analyzing every interaction, every glance, every tone of voice. Was it me? Was I too quiet? Too loud? Not relatable enough? The internal monologue was exhausting, a constant loop of self-interrogation. I started to realize that it wasn't about my performance, not entirely. It was about something deeper, something ingrained in the culture of the company, perhaps even the city itself. It was about who they expected to succeed and who they didn't. This realization was both painful and liberating. Painful, because it meant the problem wasn't entirely within my control. Liberating, because it shifted the focus from my perceived inadequacies to their actual biases. I began to channel my frustrations, not into anger, but into a quiet determination. If my voice wasn't heard in the traditional ways, I would find another way to make it resonate. I would prove my worth, not for them, but for myself. The seeds of a new path were being sown, a path that would lead me away from the echo chamber and towards a place where my ideas, my talent, and my identity could truly flourish, regardless of their recognition. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, cheerful and brightly colored. "You're invited. Southern Charm Marketing Annual Summer Picnic." It detailed the date, time, and location. A sprawling park just outside the city, known for its oak trees and open fields. My first reaction was a familiar sigh. The office picnic, an annual ritual of forced camaraderie, where the lines between professional and personal blurred, often highlighting the existing social divides even more starkly. I knew what it entailed. It meant watching colleagues laugh easily with each other, their families mingling, while I stood awkwardly on the periphery, trying to look engaged but feeling utterly invisible. It meant polite, fleeting conversations that never went anywhere. I considered making an excuse, feigning illness or a prior engagement. The thought of spending an entire Saturday being subtly excluded filled me with dread. It felt like another opportunity for my otherness to be highlighted. But then, the practical side of me kicked in. Skipping the picnic would be noticed. It would confirm their unspoken narrative that I wasn't a team player, that I didn't fit in. It would only reinforce the very isolation I was trying to navigate. So, I RSVP'd yes, a small, forced smile on my face as I clicked the button. It was an act of quiet defiance, a refusal to let their subtle biases dictate my professional conduct, even if it meant enduring discomfort. As the day approached, the office buzzed with excited chatter about the picnic. People discussed what they'd bring, who they'd see, the games they'd play. I listened, a silent observer, feeling increasingly detached from the collective enthusiasm. I overheard conversations about the fun of the picnic, the chance to really connect. I wondered if they truly believed that, or if it was just a performance for them too, a way to reinforce their own social circles. I started planning my outfit, a simple, comfortable dress that wouldn't draw too much attention, but also wouldn't make me feel completely out of place. It was a small act of control in a situation where I felt largely powerless. The days leading up to it were a blur of client work and internal preparation. I tried to focus on my tasks, to push the looming picnic to the back of my mind, but it was a persistent, low-level hum of anxiety. I thought about the last picnic, 2 years prior. I had tried to join a volleyball game and found myself consistently overlooked for passes. I had attempted to chat with a group by the grill, only for them to turn their backs as I approached. It was a stark reminder that these events, designed for team building, often serve to solidify existing cliques and highlight who was truly in and who was perpetually out. I was always the latter. This year, I resolved to approach it differently, not with naive hope, but with a quiet acceptance of what it likely would be and a determination to find some small measure of peace within that reality. I decided I would bring a book, a subtle escape if the isolation became too much. It was my small rebellion, a way to reclaim my time and space, even amidst the forced festivities. The picnic wasn't just an event, it was a symbol of the unspoken rules, the invisible barriers, and the constant effort required to simply exist and be acknowledged in that environment. I knew the day would be a test of my resilience, a public display of the private struggles I faced daily. But I would go. I would show up, and I would endure just as I always had. The sun beat down with a typical southern intensity as I pulled into the park on Saturday morning. The air was thick with the smell of grilling hot dogs, freshly cut grass, and the faint scent of sunscreen. Laughter and music already filled the air. I spotted the Southern Charm marketing banner, a bright splash of corporate branding against the lush green. Cars lined the parking lot, and groups of colleagues were already gathered, setting up blankets and coolers. I took a deep breath, adjusted my sunglasses, and grabbed my small bag, which contained my book and a bottle of water. I walked towards the main gathering, a polite smile fixed on my face, ready for the inevitable. As I approached, I saw familiar faces: Mark, Sarah from accounting, David from sales. They were all chatting animatedly, their voices carrying easily in the open air. No one seemed to notice my arrival. I found a relatively quiet spot under a large oak tree, slightly away from the main hubbub, but still within view. I laid down my blanket, sat down, and pulled out my book, pretending to be engrossed. Occasionally, someone would walk by, offer a quick, almost automatic, "Hey, Naomi," or a brief nod, their eyes already scanning for someone else. No one stopped to chat, to ask how I was, or to invite me into their circle. I watched as families arrived, children running freely, colleagues greeting each other with warm hugs and genuine smiles. It was a tableau of belonging, a scene I was observing from behind an invisible pane of glass. I saw Mark laughing loudly with the director, their heads thrown back in shared amusement. Sarah was deep in conversation with a group of women, their hands gesturing expressively. Everyone seemed to have their established place, their comfortable clique. The food line formed, and I waited patiently. When it was my turn, the volunteer serving the burgers, a young intern, barely met my gaze as he handed me a plate. It was a small detail, but it solidified the feeling of being unseen. I ate my burger slowly, savoring the taste, trying to block out the surrounding chatter. It was a strange sensation, being physically present but socially absent, a ghost at my own company celebration. A group of colleagues started a game of frisbee nearby, their shouts of encouragement echoing. I watched them, a wistful pang in my chest. I loved frisbee, but I knew better than to approach. I wouldn't be included. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, then began its slow descent. My book remained open in my lap, mostly unread. I had spent the afternoon observing, feeling the weight of my isolation. No one had approached me for a real conversation. No one had invited me to join an activity. No one had genuinely tried to bridge the gap. I was the unseen guest, the polite afterthought. As people started packing up, I quietly gathered my things. I felt a mix of exhaustion and a strange sense of clarity. This picnic wasn't just an event. It was a microcosm of my experience at Southern Charm Marketing. It was a stark, undeniable confirmation that no matter how hard I tried, how professional I was, or how much I contributed, I would always be seen as other. They had dismissed me, not with words, but with their actions, their collective indifference. Driving home, the silence in my car was a welcome relief. The weight of the day settled on me, heavy but also strangely empowering. This dismissal, this profound feeling of being overlooked, was now a catalyst. The Monday after the picnic, I walked into the office with a new kind of resolve. The sting of the weekend's dismissal was still fresh, but it had morphed into something different, a quiet, burning determination. I was tired of being invisible. I realized then that trying to fit into their mold, trying to earn their elusive acceptance, was a futile exercise. Their perception of me was not about my capabilities, it was about their biases. My energy was better spent elsewhere. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, a blank notebook open before me. I needed an outlet, a project that was entirely mine, where my ideas wouldn't be filtered, rephrased, or dismissed. I needed to build something. I thought about my true passion, helping small, independent businesses, especially those run by people of color, find their voice in a crowded market. Southern Charm Marketing focused on large, established clients. There was a huge gap for authentic, community-focused marketing. The idea, initially a vague concept, began to solidify. What if I could create a platform, a boutique agency, that truly understood and amplified these unique voices? A place where diversity wasn't just a buzzword, but the foundation of its mission. It felt daunting, almost impossible. I had a full-time job, bills to pay, and the fear of failure loomed large. But the thought of another year of quiet dismissal at Southern Charm Marketing felt far more terrifying. I started sketching out a business plan, late into the nights, fueled by strong coffee and an unshakable sense of purpose. I researched market gaps, legal requirements, and potential client bases. Every page felt like a small victory. My apartment, usually a haven of quiet reflection, transformed into a war room of ideas. Post-it notes covered my walls, diagrams of marketing funnels adorned my whiteboard, and my laptop became an extension of my ambition. I decided to keep this project entirely secret from my colleagues at Southern Charm Marketing. This wasn't just about professional boundaries. It was about protecting my dream from the very skepticism and dismissal I faced daily. This was my revolution, a quiet, personal uprising against the forces that sought to diminish me. It was a way to reclaim my narrative, to prove to myself that my ideas had value, even if others couldn't see it. I started networking discreetly, attending virtual workshops on entrepreneurship, and connecting with other small business owners online. I found a community of like-minded individuals, a stark contrast to my isolating workplace. I poured my frustration, my creativity, and my ambition into this nascent venture. Each hour spent on it felt more fulfilling than an entire week at my current job. It was a lifeline, a source of genuine excitement. The more I worked on my project, the more my confidence, which had been so eroded, began to slowly rebuild. I was no longer just an employee. I was a founder, a visionary, a creator. The office picnic, once a symbol of my exclusion, now served as a powerful reminder of why I was doing this. It was the moment they dismissed me, unknowingly igniting the very fire that would lead to my greatest achievement. My days became a carefully orchestrated dance between my corporate job and my burgeoning secret venture. From 9 to 5, I was Naomi, the quiet, efficient marketing associate at Southern Charm Marketing, navigating the familiar landscape of microaggressions and overlooked ideas. But as soon as 5 o'clock hit, a different Naomi emerged. I'd rush home, sometimes grabbing a quick, healthy dinner, and then dive into my true work. My evenings and weekends were entirely consumed by Amplify Voices, the name I had chosen for my new agency. I learned to code basic websites, devoured books on SEO and social media algorithms, and practiced my pitch until it felt natural and compelling. Every new skill acquired felt like a small act of defiance against the limitations others had placed on me. The exhaustion was real. There were nights I'd fall asleep at my desk, only to wake up an hour later, groggy but determined to push through. The passion for Amplify Voices, however, was a powerful antidote to the fatigue. I started with pro bono work for a few local Black-owned businesses, a small bakery, a boutique, a community center. Their gratitude and the visible impact of my work fueled my motivation more than any corporate bonus ever could. Their stories, their struggles, and their dreams resonated deeply with me. I understood their challenges because I lived them in a different context. This personal connection made my work for them incredibly authentic and effective. My clients became my cheerleaders, their success stories my most valuable testimonials. Word of mouth began to spread within the local minority business community. My client list, initially small, started to grow organically. I kept my two lives completely separate. At the office, I maintained my professional demeanor, never hinting at the empire I was quietly building outside its walls. It was a strange duality, a secret strength. My colleagues continued their usual routines, oblivious to the transformation happening right under their noses. They saw the same Naomi, the one they had neatly categorized and underestimated. Sometimes, a wave of bitterness would wash over me, thinking about how much effort I had poured into Southern charm marketing only to be dismissed. But then, I channeled that into my own work, making it even stronger. This double life was not just about building a business, it was about healing. Each successful campaign for Amplify Voices was a balm to the wounds inflicted by years of being unseen and unheard. I was proving to myself, first and foremost, that my ideas were valuable, that my voice mattered, and that my unique perspective was a powerful asset, not a liability. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my corporate job continued to overlook my potential, my personal venture was thriving precisely because it embraced the very qualities they ignored. I knew this quiet revolution couldn't last forever. There would come a time when my two worlds would inevitably collide. But for now, I was content to build, to grow, and to prepare for that moment. The annual Charleston Business Innovators Gala was a prestigious event, a gathering of the city's most influential entrepreneurs and established companies. Southern Charm Marketing always had a prominent table, and attendance was mandatory for senior staff. I, as usual, was not considered senior staff. My attendance was optional, a polite afterthought. But this year, something was different. Amplify Voices, my secret agency, had been nominated for the Emerging Business of the Year award. I received the email notification weeks before the gala, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a local award, yes, but it was significant. It meant my work was being recognized by the wider business community independently. I decided to attend, not as an employee of Southern Charm Marketing, but as Naomi, founder of Amplify Voices. It was time for my two worlds to finally meet on my terms. I chose a stunning, vibrant gown, a stark contrast to my usual subdued office attire. As I walked into the grand ballroom, the familiar faces from Southern Charm Marketing were already there, clustered around their table, laughing. Mark, the director, Sarah, they all looked up as I entered, a flicker of surprise in their eyes. I offered a polite nod, a small, knowing smile, and made my way to a different table, one reserved for the nominees. I felt a surge of confidence, a sense of belonging I had never experienced at any company event. The evening progressed, filled with polite speeches and networking. I mingled, not with my colleagues, but with other entrepreneurs, sharing stories and exchanging business cards. It was exhilarating to be seen as an equal a peer. Then came the moment for the Emerging Business of the Year award. The presenter began to describe the nominee, highlighting their innovative approach to marketing, their commitment to underserved communities, and their rapid growth. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every word felt like it was describing Amplify Voices. I glanced at the Southern Charm Marketing table. They were listening intently, oblivious, still focused on their own conversations. And the winner is Amplify Voices, founded by Naomi Clark. The announcement boomed through the ballroom. A collective gasp rippled through the Southern Charm Marketing table. Their heads snapped towards me. I walked to the stage, the spotlight suddenly blinding, the applause a roaring wave. As I accepted the award, I looked out at the sea of faces, my eyes briefly meeting those of my colleagues. Their expressions were a mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning realization. I gave a short, heartfelt speech, thanking my clients and my community for their trust and support. I spoke about the power of authentic voices and the importance of seeing and valuing every story. When I stepped off the stage, the atmosphere had completely shifted. Colleagues from Southern Charm Marketing, who had ignored me for years, were now making a beeline towards me, their faces contorted with forced smiles and belated congratulations. "Naomi! I had no idea," Mark exclaimed, his usual booming voice now laced with an awkward deference. "This is incredible. Why didn't you ever tell us?" The irony was almost too much to bear. I simply smiled. I suppose I was busy building it. It was a quiet, understated victory, but the impact was undeniable. The spotlight, which had always eluded me in their world, was now firmly on me on my terms. The days following the gala were a whirlwind. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from colleagues at Southern Charm Marketing, now eager to catch up or discuss potential collaborations. The invisible wall had crumbled, replaced by an awkward, belated interest. The director, Mr. Harrison, called me into his office, a rare occurrence. He praised my initiative and entrepreneurial spirit, suggesting ways Southern Charm Marketing could support, amplify voices, perhaps even acquire it. I listened politely, a quiet amusement playing on my lips. The same company that had dismissed my ideas for years, that had seen me as an unseen guest at their picnic, now wanted a piece of my success. I declined their offers, gracefully but firmly. Amplify Voices was my creation, born from my resilience, and it would remain independent. It was a powerful moment of reclaiming my agency, of setting my own terms. My resignation from Southern Charm Marketing was met with surprise, even disbelief. They couldn't fathom why I would leave a stable position, failing to grasp that stability without recognition was a gilded cage. Leaving that office for the last time felt like shedding a heavy cloak. The air outside felt lighter, the Charleston sun warmer. I was finally free to fully embrace the path I had forged for myself. Amplify Voices continued to grow, expanding its reach beyond Charleston, attracting clients who valued authentic connection and diverse perspectives. My team grew, a vibrant, inclusive group of professionals who shared my vision. I often think back to that office picnic, to the feeling of being utterly dismissed, a ghost among the living. It was a painful experience, but it was also the crucible in which my greatest strength was forged. Their inability to see my worth, their casual dismissal of my presence, didn't diminish me. Instead, it ignited a fire, pushing me to create a space where my value, and the value of others like me, could never be overlooked. The true spotlight wasn't on a stage at a gala or in the pages of a business magazine. It was the internal light I found within myself, the recognition of my own power and potential, independent of external validation. Success, I realized, wasn't about proving others wrong, though that was a sweet byproduct. It was about proving to myself what I was capable of, about building something meaningful that aligned with my values. Naomi, the unseen employee, had transformed into Naomi, the recognized entrepreneur, not because I changed who I was, but because I finally found a space where who I was could truly shine. My journey taught me that sometimes, the greatest acts of dismissal can be the most powerful catalysts for self-discovery and extraordinary achievement. They thought they were sidelining me, but they were actually pushing me towards my destiny.